Simone, I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be talking about a phenomenon this election cycle where ethnic minorities have been moving very quickly more and more to voting Republican, specifically in the changeover from the Biden running for office to the Kamala running for office, which is really interesting to me because I think a lot of people would assume, oh, now we've got a multiracial, a Black Indian woman who's running for office. Like, obviously she'll get more, like Obama did, more of the Black vote to show up than historically did. And yet we are seeing the exact opposite, and not just the Black vote, but basically across the board.
Wasn't that the term for our polling station?
We know a shorter route to our Democratic polling station.
You know how us Democrats like a shortcut, like government spending to prop up the economy.
Nothing more we love than those federal programs.
You two are Democrats, aren't you?
What? Of course we are.
I mean, you see the color of our skin, don't you? How could we not blindly vote Democratic?
Would you like to know more?
So we are going to go over the numbers for each ethnic group. We're going to go over what might be causing this, and we are going to go over what this means for the future of American politics.
That
Ready
is
to go,
so
Simone?
cool. Let's do this.
So in the 2020 election, Biden won approximately 92% of the Black vote. Only 8% of the Black vote didn't vote for Biden.
That's insane. That is very impressive.
Yeah, current polling shows Kamala leading Trump 78% to 15% among Black voters. Huge difference. 26% of Black men aged 18 to 40 said they would vote for Trump in the latest Gen Forward poll, compared to 12% of Black women in the same age group. This represents a major shift from 2020. And if you look at the polls that I sent you, so this is mostly happening in young Black men, we see a really interesting phenomenon.
Now, people think that Black voters are a monolith. In fact, Black Republicans alone are an extremely diverse group of people.
Which is that with Black voters, unlike pretty much any other voter demographic you're going to look at, the younger they are, and it's proportional to their age, the more pro-Republican they are. And it is increasing with each generation here. So here we can look at two different polls. One is looking at different age groups, and it asks them, please assess your feelings towards Donald Trump on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is cold and 10 is very warm. And you see, of the very warm category, if you look at Black voters over 65, it's only 4%. If you look at Black voters 18 to 29, it's 29%.
What is going on?
And just so people can get an idea of what this looks like in sort of a tiered way, it's 4% for the 65 plus. To the 45-64, it's 10%. For the 30-44, it's 19%. And then, for the last group, it's 29%. And you see the same thing in terms of the number who feel neutral to him. It's significantly increasing over time. With the young age group, it's 41% feel neutral to him, only 7% in the oldest age group. And in the youngest age group, only 28% have a cold opinion of him, while 87% of the oldest age group do. Isn't that why? And this is increasing still with every generation. So I would expect it to be more the next generation, more the next generation, more the next generation.
Yeah, which is tempered, I guess, by young voter turnout being lower, but that's still very impressive.
Well, it does mean a permanent political shift. And
yes,
let's go to this next poll here. How welcoming do you think the Republican Party is to Black people? And again, you have the exact same thing. If you're looking at not welcoming at all, it's 57% of the 65 plus group, but of the under 29 group, that's only 17% who have that perception. And if you look at the extremely welcoming category, 3% of the over 65 group, 11% of the 18 to 29 group.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah, well, and if you look at somewhat welcoming in the old age group, it's only 7%. In the young age group, it's 31%.
Well, I mean, is this part of the whole youth political divide between women and men, whereby men are just getting increasingly conservative and women are getting less? And could it be that women to a certain extent, or even just shoving men into a more conservative position through their mental and cultural toxicity?
I think it is. So I watched a bunch of interviews with Black individuals on why they're voting for Trump. So I could say, from my perception, I'd say, well, I assume that the racist way that Democrats keep talking about ethnic minorities is probably a pretty big play here. Like when Hope Not Hate was talking to us, they go, you say you support exceptional people having more kids in secret, but on your website, you say you support Hispanics having more kids. And I was like, I don't see a contradiction there. Why do you see a contradiction there? Or Obama's recent thing when Black voters, he's like, well, we have a huge problem with young male Black voters, and it's because they won't vote for a woman. They're very misogynistic. And I was like, that seems like a very racist opinion and not at all what I've seen anyone say. And so I think part of it is this increasingly racist attitude, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black, like this stealing of the Black identity. And then removing anyone, like imagine you felt that way, like people said to you, you couldn't identify as whatever your core like ethnic or whatever identity was because you didn't hold X political positions, which is what they're always saying. Like whenever, there's a famous Black Republican or something like that, they're like, well, they don't really count as Black culturally speaking.
Here's what's so interesting though, is that I'm picking up on this for another episode right now. I'm trying to do research on what Black Lives Matter as an organization raised and what they did with that money. And one of the things that I'm seeing they did in 2020, sort of at their height, when they got the most attention, was create a PAC and try to influence the vote. And they decided that one of the most important areas where they needed to exert pressure was on Black male voters, because they felt that they had the lowest turnout and the lowest engagement. So their work really focused on engaging them and getting them to vote. But I feel like this very fact that there is this perception and I guess acknowledgement of lower Black male voter engagement for obviously Democratic candidates and causes maybe kind of indicates like, guys, maybe they aren't really on your side. Like maybe they're not really Democrats. Maybe that you're pitching to them isn't resonating. Maybe this whole like, trans-free housing thing and like community work thing isn't really, what they're into right now.
So historically, when older Black voters would vote Republican, the thing that drove them to do it was two things. One is that they didn't feel like the policies were actually supporting the Black community. This is what you have was like Clarence Thomas, and he was very anti things like affirmative action because he felt it hurt the Black community, right? And a lot of older Blacks would side with Republicans sometimes because they agreed with them on social issues, whether it was, being more resistant to LGBT stuff, whether it was, which the Black community is generally not very pro when contrasted with white voters, whether it was being more conservative on abortion, whether it was being more conservative, it was on social issues. What's very interesting is the shift in the Black community now among young Blacks to being more Republican is not about being more conservative on social issues. It appears to be predominantly twofold. One, or I'd say threefold. One, they feel like we've been trying this Democrat thing forever. They don't actually seem to care about us. They never actually seem to do anything for us. And it appears that the Republicans actually try when they get in office for us. And so that was one thing. The second thing was they appear to be more fiscally conservative than previous generations. And I'll run through some quotes here that seem to indicate this to me, but it appears that they're mostly voting for Republicans despite more conservative social policies because they do not believe in what the Democrats have done to the economy or the Democrats have given them opportunities. And then the final category here that we see is they are voting more Republican because I can't remember the final point I had, but you were going to say something?
I think the thing is that Black men aren't interested in being someone's bitch. They're interested in succeeding and excelling and being exceptional. And the problem is that even now, as the Democrat Party is trying to cater to their interests, they're like, oh, don't worry, we'll give you handouts and special treatment and you'll be, it's okay, just like, but they're being very condescending. And I think that's not how these people identify. Like these are people who want Yeah, they want to start businesses, and I think that there's some attempt to cater to that, but they're like, oh, we'll give you loans that we'll forgive because we know you can't pay them off. Like, it's just so insulting. It is deeply insulting. Like,
I
oh,
agree.
we
So I'll
understand
give
that
you
you
some.
like crypto. Don't worry, we'll support it. Whereas, like, over here, Donald Trump's like, here's my meme coin. I'm gonna like pump and dump it. And everyone's like, yeah, Trump, you do you. Like, there's there's just a very different. Trump gets it. Also, like, when I look at like a lot of really popular, like primarily Black cast TV shows, or like I guess you could say like Black demographic targeted TV shows, I guess like some of them are like looking at lower economic rungs of society, but a lot of them are just looking at extreme levels of wealth. Like, it's aspirational. And I think the other problem is that when the Democrat Party caters to Black voters, they're all about like, oh, poverty and blah, blah, and that's not aspirational. Like, no one wants to vote for that. And a lot of people complain about, oh, well, poor, uneducated people vote for Republicans and vote for low taxes because they expect to be rich someday. How pathetic. But I think that's where a lot of us are.
Do you remember the Biden gaffe where he's like, well, I want this policy to work for both rich people and Black people?
Not. Oh my
God. That was one of his gaffes.
We have this notion that somehow if you're poor, you cannot do it. Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
That's what a slip. I mean, that just shows like how they see. And I think this goes back to our episode on how the leftists and Democrats in America decided suddenly to hijack Black identity and be like, Black identity is now victim identity, and we're going to save you and we're going to take care of you. Whereas Black identity before was enterprising, it was wealthy, and yes, it was often subject to insane bias and riots and their whole communities being burnt down. But why were their communities being burnt down? Because white people were jealous of their economic flourishing. Okay, that's what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this whole concept of Black people are poor, Black people can't pay back their loans, Black people need social handouts is so deeply insulting. And I think that there's this undercurrent, especially among Black men who get it, who are not buying into that narrative, who are like, yeah, like, screw this.
Let's read some quotes from various Black people here when they were being asked why are they voting for Trump. Okay. And I think what you'll see is, here's one, right? We want prosperity, and we want secure borders, and we want the American dream, Maxwell said. And only the Republican Party is speaking to this message because they have the policies in terms of limited government. Drill, baby, drill. And very...
that's someone who's speaking as an American. And I think that's the other thing is it's someone who's not captured by identity politics, which is refreshing.
Well, very interesting. The drill, baby, drill slogan seems to be really popular among Black conservatives.
Really?
I haven't heard any white conservative use this slogan this election cycle. I heard it multiple times when I was watching videos of Black conservatives speaking on the issues that they cared about.
When I hear drill, baby, drill, I like see Sarah Palin. I don't like that, like, it invokes her.
I think what it speaks to is this idea that regulations are keeping their communities in poverty, and that if you just went out and did like exploit our environment for resources, people would have jobs again. Then another one, and what a lot of them were saying is, I can't afford to. Another thing that a lot of them were saying when they were being interviewed is basically, I can't afford another 4 years of this. Like, that is not realistic at all. But here's another one. Now, this is somebody who is a 20-year-old who is voting for Democrats, but she was noticing that a lot of her friends are voting for Republicans. And so in explaining, even as an uncharitable person, why her friends are voting for Republicans, she says, the thing that I hear a lot of is, if a person is really conservative, they really like how the economics are handled by Republicans. Usually with social issues, they tend to be more liberal. At least like my friends who maybe are in the middle or leaning conservative, they'll be more liberal on social issues and more conservative with economics, which is an inverse of the reason why Blacks flipped parties before. And I find that to be very, very interesting.
That's fascinating.
I think it does come down to what you're saying here, which is the self-empowerment thing. But now let's talk about other ethnic groups, because it is across the board here.
Yeah. So Rainey Center, which we're a fan of, had the biggest surprise for me on the front of other demographics when they came out in September of this year with survey data indicating that 30% of Muslims in America planned on voting for Trump.
Oh, then the numbers have changed since then. I haven't gotten to those numbers yet. But actually, now in 2020, Biden won Arab Americans by a 24-point margin.
Yeah.
Current polling shows Trump having tied with Harris among Arab Americans. It's both 40%.
Wow. Okay, so it's wow, that's 'cause one thing that I hear savvy political commentators talk about a lot is it doesn't you don't learn a whole lot by seeing what the static poll numbers are. What matters more is what direction are things going in? And if that's happening, what is going on?
That's a huge shift. Now, Simone, actually, before we go further, you had some stuff you wanted to talk about with the Black Lives Matter thing. Like nobody watched their video or like they didn't have that much cultural reach.
Well, I need to get to the bottom of this more. This is for research I'm doing on that other Black Lives Matter episode. But one of the big things when they raised a ton of money in 2020 was, oh my gosh, there's an election this year. We have to change the outcome of the election. We're going to raise money for a super PAC. And in addition to trying to increase Black male voter turnout and engagement, they commissioned a TV commercial, which they ran. Apparently, they paid to run ads on it on social media in addition to on TV. But then I checked their YouTube channel, which has all of 6 subscribers, and it has 1.1K views. And I'm like, how is this even happening? And I mean, I watched the video and it just didn't.
I sometimes wonder if that movement wasn't more astroturfed than the public believes.
Yeah, there's a lot I want to dig into there for sure. I mean, they re-granted a lot, so I don't blame them for not necessarily doing a ton internally with their own program like fundraising, but they raised a lot for their PAC, and they raised in 2020 over $90 million. And they only re-granted 23% of their assets, which is a lot for the industry, which typically re-grants about 5 to 8%. I think probably because they normally do stuff in-house. But yeah, even having raised 90 million and re-granted 23%, you would expect them to do more. And
well, didn't they just spend it all on mansions?
Okay, so like a lot of that happened, and we'll get to that in the episode. But what I was surprised with was just like the work they were doing. They did get some admirable door knocking volunteer turnout, and I think that's because there was so much energy in 2020 of people just saying, I want to do something. Like I am really frustrated with the way that Black Americans experience America right now. I'm not happy with it. And so they got a lot of help there, but I was surprised by how flat their ad felt, just how flat it fell and how little engagement they seemed to be getting.
Interesting. Okay, now by the way, to the Arab American things that we were talking about,
yes.
How did it go from winning with a 24-point margin to equal votes?
Well, yeah, and apparently from 30% now to 40%. This is, things are changing rapidly.
The key thing appears to be that they are very, very dissatisfied with how the Israeli-Palestine issue is being handled by the Biden administration, and they don't think that Harris has significantly distanced her stance from the administration. And it's for 29% of them, it's the primary issue. Now, I think a lot of people are surprised then that they would move to Trump, who might be seen as being even more pro-Israel than the Biden administration.
Right.
But I think it's because they believe that Trump can actually get things done in terms of creating some kind of a peaceful resolution, because he's actually willing to try and do stuff.
But also, like, look at how Trump is super chill and broy with a lot of like different Islamic and
yeah, he's very good at dealing with Muslim individuals.
Yeah, he's super Persian in his aesthetic. So I don't know. I kind of feel there. I'm of two minds. One is, okay, there's Israel and he's down with Israel, right? But also he got more done in terms of Middle Eastern peace relations, working in concert.
You know why I think he does so well with that audience, and I think it's something that a lot of people are discounting when they see Trump, is that when he meets with these Arab kings often who have all this money and all these fancy palaces and all these cool gadgets, he is genuinely impressed with this sort of stuff and gets excited about it.
Yeah.
And for these types of individuals, that is the highest compliment they can get. To be showing the US president around, and the US president is giddy at every new stupid gadget they show him. every new.
Are you
fancy
picturing
thing
the
they show him.
globe image?
Oh yeah, the globe where he's like, "Oh, this is so cool."
They're all touching it. And I feel like they're just all having this moment where they're like, "Guys, let's take a group picture." You can just see they're like girls at a sleepover. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's something that Biden or Kamala has been able to connect with them on because they're
Yeah.
too reserved and trying to play whatever 4D
Well, I
game.
didn't. No, it's not even that. They're like they're prejudiced, they're elitist, they're I don't know, like racist or what's the ethnic version of racist or like cultural version of racist, but they
Well,
kind
they're
of
cultural supremacists. They
they're
when
cultural
they meet
supremacists.
them,
They're
they're
like,
like, these
well,
people are lesser than me.
my like Anglo-waspy background, and yes, I am calling Kamala more Anglo and waspy because she grew up in freaking Berkeley. Like
Yeah.
she's a white NPR listening, like she might as well be a white NPR listening reform Jew. I don't know how else to put it, but like that's kind of the look, you know, of like that Bay Area Berkeley kind of person. And those people go to places like the Middle East and they look down upon those cultures. And Trump goes there and he's like, "God, I wish we could do that here. Like, man, you guys pull it off."
Yeah, he said that once or something, and everyone's like, "What? You can't say that. That's against the rules."
Yeah, so I that is one thing. I think the other thing, though, and this is something that I'm seeing as a candidate for state rep on a more local level, is that there are some people who are so vehemently passionate about an issue that if they feel like the person who should be their ally is not fully 100% in conformity with their desires, that they will vote for the other person out of spite. So, on the position, for example, of abortion, the fact that I have this middle ground means that out of spite, some Republicans who are very, very, very anti-abortion are going to vote for my Democratic opponent, who is even more pro-abortion than I am.
For the restrict abortion access.
Yes.
Just not as much as they want.
Yes. So because I'm not as restrictive as they want me to be, they're going to vote for my opponent out of spite. My opponent who is not in favor of more restrictions, whereas I am. And I think that that might be the other thing that's going on, is just the fact that the would-be Palestinian ally is not sufficiently saying that we have to, you know, from the river to the sea. And she's not saying this every time she stands in front of an audience after giving her land acknowledgements, that means that they're not going to vote for her. That honestly, it's the weirdest thing. It does not make any sense, but I do think that it is happening because I am seeing it myself.
Yeah, I could 100% see that. I will note when people are like, "How pro-Israel is Trump?" If you forgot, when I was in Israel the last time I was there, it was during the Trump administration, and there were all these threats because Trump had moved the U.S. embassy back into Jerusalem, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was like, "Oh my God, you can't do that. Like, we were supposed to have removed our embassy." And he's like, "No, I'm not going to do it. Build an embassy." And
He and Kushner got more done in the Middle East than
anyone. Everyone knows they were incredibly successful there. So, and then the to understand how much Israel loves Trump, I remember when I'd walk around the city at night, there were big like skyscrapers that had Trump's face projected on them. That was how in love like Israel was with Trump during at least the period when I was walking around there.
Wow.
So they are Trump likes them and they like him, and yet the Middle Easterners are like, "Yeah, I just won't." I also think the other thing that you mentioned there, and I've mentioned this before, I think culturally he connects with them. A lot of the Arab Americans are Persian Arab Americans, and Persians are like Trump culturally is much more Persian than he is waspy.
He's not even, yeah, I mean, he's only waspy insofar as he wears like American flag colored.
Yeah, if you look at like his house, like it would be considered garish by most like waspy Americans. The only houses I've ever seen look like that are either maybe Persian Americans, maybe Armenian Americans, but mostly it's like more Persian-y. But again, similar regions there. All right, so next group we're going to be talking about here, the Hispanic American voter.
Oh, goodness.
So these individuals in 2020, Biden won about 63% of Hispanic voters. By the way, I don't
Which is surprising to me. In 2020, I would expect fewer because so many of our Hispanic friends were like really, really, really angry about the Democratic Party's treatment of many Latino neighborhoods during all of the protests.
Simone, that's not that much. 63% of the Hispanic vote?
Come on, that's still too much.
They act like it's a locked down thing. That's almost half. And now where are we? Kamala is leading. Trump was 56%.
Okay, so again, that directionality is definitely in favor of Republican parties.
And 44% of Latino men 18 to 40 said they would vote for Trump, up from 38% in 2020. So you're seeing a dramatic rise here. And Pew Research Center found that Trump gained 10 percentage points among Hispanic voters from 2016 to 2020. So it's a continuing trend as well. So when we're going from 2020 to 2024, that to me is, I think, of the biggest thing. And that's how Florida, if anyone's been looking at maps recently of like where states are likely to go, that's why Florida's not a swing state anymore. Florida became a solid red state because the Hispanic vote moved to a split. As to why it moved to a split, again, this is the ethnic community that we are closest with, which is why I was most offended by the Hope Not Hate's incredibly racist accusation that there's no exceptional Hispanic people. But
I cannot believe.
Well, but anyway, so yeah, we're very close with Hispanic people in Hispanic culture, and they engage with information. I've mentioned this before, so I'll be fairly quick about it. Very different from other cultural groups in America, meaning they mostly exchange information through family networks and not through like news sites and stuff like that they'll see with more suspicion. A lot of Hispanic individuals are business owners, and it was their businesses that were disproportionately torched during the BLM riots, because they were the ones on the outskirts of those Black communities. And when the Democrats did nothing, when they didn't denounce the riots, when they, like Tim Walz's wife, who opened the window to smell the businesses burning during the BLM riots, those were mostly Hispanic minority-owned businesses that were burning that she wasn't going to smell.
You're also missing I think we should address a really key issue as well, which is a very hot topic in the United States and so many other nations right now: immigration. And I think a lot of Democrats are like, well, of course Hispanics want open borders. No, they don't. Those who immigrated or first generation immigrants went through so much shit to get into the country. They busted their asses. They paid thousands and thousands of dollars to immigration lawyers. They spent years on wait lists. They went through tons of bureaucratic hoops. And suddenly all these people are coming through this porous border and getting us like random support and get out of jail free cards. They're pissed.
It's not just that, but Hispanics don't see themselves, like, if you actually are friends with real Hispanics and not this insane, like, if you're not going to say something offensive like Latinx, which of course is hugely offensive to most Hispanic communities, you would know that Hispanics don't see themselves as a unified ethnic group. They see themselves as, as Mexican or as Brazilian or as Peruvian or as Costa Rican. And many of these groups have an incredible amount of, I don't know if racism is the right word, but a degree of prejudice against other Hispanic groups. A Hispanic Mexican, for example, is going to often think very disparagingly about, for example, maybe a Venezuelan immigrant or something like that, right? And so when Democrats think because they are supporting immigration that they are earning goodwill across the Hispanic community, they're just wrong about this. If you look at Mexico,
the monolith, yeah. Well, and also like treating, first generation, second generation, and third generation immigrants from Central or South America as though they're the same as like potential refugees or something who are coming into it's insane. It's unhinged. And I think it would majorly piss me off. I can understand why it would alienate many other voters. That said, we do have plenty of like broadly Latin American friends who are huge supporters of Kamala Harris. So it's not,
what's interesting to me is when they are supporters of Kamala Harris, they are not supporters of her in the I support her because she supports immigration way. They're supporters of her.
Yeah, immigration doesn't come up.
We sell travel to various ethnic groups, and we have a lot of travel sales in Latin America. One of the things that sells very well to the Latin American audience, I'd say, is the cliche beach Instagram picture vacation, which is the vacation that gets you on a nice looking beach where you can take Instagram pictures with pretty ladies and post that. And this to me as a vacation is mortifying. This style of vacation does not sell well often within white ethnic groups, unless you're talking like college kids or something. I think that their support of Kamala feels very much to me like the classic beach vacation package, because it's like what you're supposed to support if you're like a,
Good person.
yeah, if you're a good, cool person on
You're just
social
basically
media.
saying anyone who's basic or who's more conformist in broad America mainstream media culture is probably going to be
Yes.
more. Yeah, because you are evil per mainstream American culture. Also,
Actually, that's
I
a
would
great way to put
argue
it.
the trend that I see more commonly is just culturally, if you're a more empathetic person, that is to say that, you know, things pull at your heartstrings more, you are more likely to vote for Kamala and have a really difficult time stomaching Trump.
I think that there is a portion of the Hispanic community that is aspirationally basic, and I think that that is where the Dems have the
Okay, so you're
best.
gonna say the live, laugh, love Latinos are voting for
Yes, the
Kamala.
live, laugh, love Latinos. That is the category voting for Kamala. Well, no, I
Mhm.
mean, among especially Latino women, that's a big category. It's not like,
Yeah, fair, fair.
a small group. But basically, over time, I expect some degree of Democrat erosion within the Latino community. However, I think something that's really important to remember, if you look at the El Norte cultural region of the US, which is the high immigrant cultural region, it's actually the key voter base of the current Democratic Party, not the Northeast, as many people assume. If you look at voting patterns, in the same way that the greater Appalachia is the key voter base of Trump. And I think that, and not the Deep South, like many people presume. And I think that we will, previously I was like, before I looked at the Catholic statistics, I was like, I think that we will eventually convert the Hispanic population to being more conservative leaning.
Yeah.
Now I no longer think that. If you look at the percent Catholic of a district in the United States, that is one of the like highest correlates we have found to how likely they are to be Democratic voting. Catholics are just very Democratic voting. It's sort of like the party of Catholics. And so long as they stay Catholic, I don't think we're going to be able to ever really flip those districts that they're disproportionately immigrating into. That said, we have seen a lot of conversions to Protestantism within the first generation Latin American community.
Really?
So,
I'm not
oh,
familiar with
yeah,
that.
it's been a huge thing in the data. Yeah, huge. They're converting. I think it's like the number one source of new evangelicals.
God, Catholic Church, get your act together.
Well, it's the fun side. It's like in Madagascar.
Catholicism can be fun. Catholicism can be so fun. You get to sin and then just confess. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
All right, so next group, Asian Americans. In
Oh.
2020, 54% of Asian American voters intended to vote for Joe Biden, while in 2024, 46% said they were inclined to vote for Harris. So again, about a 10% loss there, 8 percentage point decrease.
Hemorrhaging.
Biden won Asian American voters by a margin of 72 to 28%. Current polling shows Harris at 66 to 28%. So just huge loss across the board in every ethnic group. And I think that there's different reasons for each group, but I think that we will continue to see this shift as time goes on.
I think the one place where Harris is incredibly strong is just white women. And
well, I think Live, Laugh, Love is the only community that she's strong.
And they are a very conscientious voter base. So I think that it wouldn't be a bad one to have in the bag. But even when I look, for example, at the Kamala Harris opportunity agenda for Black men, when I reviewed that again, I'm like, this isn't for Black men. This is for white women.
Tell me what it is. What do they offer?
So the Opportunity Agenda for Black Men is a policy initiative aimed at addressing economic and social challenges faced by Black men in the United States. Just that framing alone, like in the sort of premise of presenting this, is emasculating and insulting to Black men in America. Mm-hmm. Like, you need extra help, don't you? But I think it's really there for dealing with guilt. So in terms of economic empowerment, and this is also where it just gets so ridiculous and insulting, the agenda proposes to provide up to 1 million forgivable loans, up to $20,000 each for Black entrepreneurs. who have, historically
I
faced.
love the Dems that are like, Elon Musk is giving out money to people. Like, you can't do that. And meanwhile, Kamala Harris is like, yeah, I'm going to give out money if I win.
Well, no, but legal experts argue that policies distributing resources based on race could face significant constitutional challenges, and programs that provide preferences based on race have been struck down in court previously, like disaster relief programs. So the problem here too, and I think if I were a Black business owner who could potentially benefit from one of these loans, I'd be like, okay, great, but you're just going to waste my time on a loan application that's going to take forever to process, and then it's going to be rejected and seen as constitutionally illegitimate, because it is. Like, you can't just give away a whole bunch of money to a group based on their racial identity. That's insane.
This was actually really interesting. When I heard some Black people explaining why they're not going to vote for Kamala, they were really annoyed by her plan to give out like free money for housing that like to first time homeowners. They were like, okay, either this just isn't going to happen, and even if it does happen, how is this fair? Like,
so what this is you're referring to the element of this initiative whereby the administration would offer $25,000 in down payment assistance to first-time home buyers.
Yeah, they're like, we've heard this lie before, and even if it goes through, I own my home. What about me? Are they going to give me $20,000?
Yeah, it's kind of like student loan forgiveness. We're like, oh, so I paid off my student loan. Fuck me, I guess. Like, sorry for being conscientious. It just sends so many bad messages.
Well, it's like a party. It's like, it sort of is like, we're a party that helps parasites. If you live your life as parasitically as possible, then we will benefit you more.
But I feel like it's really insulting. And I don't know, like a common element that I see among we'll say like Black characters in media who I see receiving widespread admiration is that these are proud, very strong, very competent people. And this image of Black men that is being painted by the Harris administration is of needy, incompetent victims.
It's so true. Well, no, in Obama, it's like savage men who can like barely contain.
Insecure, like backward, savage, incompetent victims. Like just the worst.
But it's just like when the FAA said, well, we need to hire more Black people, but we can't explicitly do it. So we'll just put on tests that will hire people who have problems with authority, hate science was their least favorite class in school, and don't take directions well. It's like they literally think of Black people in these racial stereotypes.
Well, yeah. Also, I mean, back to the agenda, that part of that specific agenda for Black men, not just for Americans, but for Black men specifically, is proposing the legalization of marijuana at the federal level, because weed's a Black person thing. Like there's so many things that are
this
deeply wrong.
Reminds me of like when BLM was like, oh, well, don't you know that we need to support the dissolution of the nuclear family because that's a Black person thing. And then we point out that if you go to the 1960s, Black families actually had much stronger marriage relationships. You can watch our Black episode on this, and actually had Black women were less than half as likely as white women to be out of wedlock, and they had children out of wedlock at less than half the rate of white people. Now it's, what is it, 70% of Black kids are born out of wedlock, I think, at this point, but it used to be less than half the white rate.
Although how many, I feel like across all demographics, more kids are born out of wedlock these days.
Yeah, they are, but now it's much more in the Black community.
No, I mean, honestly, if someone told me that was the same with white populations, I wouldn't be remotely surprised.
It's not.
I mean, look at Sweden. No one gets married anymore.
Well, that's a different cultural structure. It's not that they don't have two parents. It's that people just choose to live together and they don't do the official marriage ceremony.
Well, that doesn't mean that Black families that are having kids.
In America right now, many Black children are being raised not knowing who their fathers are. Like that's a totally different phenomenon.
Yeah, okay, that is different. But yeah, I just wow. How can all of this hold, and how can Black men not be overwhelmingly voting? Like, at least not for Kamala Harris. I just Even if I wanted handouts, I would be so dubious of the likelihood of these handouts coming to me that I would be deeply concerned. Just doesn't seem
Well, and
likely.
I think that's the way a lot of the community feels. They just don't trust Democrats anymore.
Well, and yet still, I mean, isn't it that the majority of Black voters, broadly speaking, plan on voting
Right, but
Democrat?
it's changing.
Yeah.
It's changing. And I wouldn't be, and I think it's very interesting that Kamala was the one who initiated this change, presumably the person who at least identifies as a Black American.
Well,
But
I don't know.
I think,
Trump has argued that she didn't identify as a Black American until it was expedient, and before that, maybe she was Indian, maybe she was mixed race or whatever. But
yeah,
I don't blame her for that. If I had multiple potential racial backgrounds that I could identify with, I would chameleon my way around the world too. Like,
yeah,
use
it's,
what you got.
it's benefited me. But then it's, I do think that he is accurate in that attack of her. And Democrats being like, oh, how dare he do that? I'm like, yeah, but like when they were like shocked that he called her the DEI candidate, I think like, well,
But he like literally was, because I think at some point during his candidacy for president, Biden had said, I promise I will choose. It was like either like a like non-white vice president.
Yeah.
He made a pledge to have a DEI candidate, and then he got one, and now it's like, oh, but how dare you say that that's what it is, because
it's a DEI candidate. Yeah. And I'd also note here that, I mean, she never won any major election. Like when in the primaries, when the Biden season, she was doing super poorly.
I don't think she made it to Iowa. Yeah. Which
Yeah,
is
to
for
be
outsiders, that's kind
appointed
of like
as the default candidate
basic
is
milestone.
insane.
Yeah.
And obviously the final thing, and we've mentioned this before, but it's worse if you don't know this. She did jail a bunch of innocent Black people, thousands literally, during her tenure. She didn't release them when they were supposed to be released in order to win an election. She used them for free labor when it would have been cheaper to pay them. She's just everything that Black Lives Matter said it was campaigning against. She has called herself the top cop of California. And when she says that, she means in the corrupt, slimy, racist way. But anyway, you can watch our Kamala video for more on that. I hope you have a wonderful night, Simone. And I'm so disappointed. There's a Elon Trump rally right next to our house tonight. And
tonight?
It's Tuesday, right?
Tonight. I don't know. I don't even know if it's happening anymore. I haven't seen
I kind of feel like it's not happening because I haven't figured out how to sign up for it. And that's kind of surprising to me.
I don't think I can't find news coverage of it anymore. I feel like things were taken down and it was canceled. So don't worry about it.
All right. Well, for tonight, I really love those taquitos you made yesterday. Can you make more of something like that?
There were leftover ones of that.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want leftovers. I can do leftover taquitos with pumpkin ravioli and pesto. You need to use some pesto.
Oh, yeah. I do need to eat some pumpkin ravioli and pesto. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. Because then if you don't like the taquitos, there's pumpkin ravioli and pesto.
Oh, you're going to like the taquitos. You're going to use the air fryer, which will make them extra crispy, right?
Yeah, and I might like sprinkle a little more butter on top of or something. Or maybe, do you want me to put cheddar cheese on top? No, it makes them soggy. I don't know.
No, I actually do want, I was actually thinking they need cheese.
Okay, so some melted cheddar cheese on top, yeah?
Melted cheddar cheese. I don't want to eat it. How many do we have left?
3.
Yeah, that's a full meal. Give me the 3 melted cheddar cheese on top.
And then no pumpkin ravioli?
No pumpkin ravioli. We'll do that tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, not cheddar cheese, American cheese. Okay, cheddar cheese.
I mean, I'm like, we can do American cheese for like grilled cheese. Like there are places for it. This is not the place. You don't want gelatin. You don't put gelatin on top of taquitos.
Are they in a way where you couldn't put anything else inside them?
Yeah, they're like melded together.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
I know. I was thinking about the
scallions.
Scallions, yeah. Putting some not scall. What are those shallots? Shallots.
I can chop up the shallots finely, put them in a dipping dish, and you can dip. I don't know. Maybe. Do you want me to?
Nah, I think it's fine the way it is, but the cheddar is a good idea.
Okay. We'll do that. And I love you.
I love you too, Simone. You are a great wife. And if you wanted to give me something a little extra, some tomato soup.
Oh, that's good because we did open it. And you can dip it. Oh, you can dip it.
taquitos with Penang.
Cheese taquitos with Penang and pumpkin dipped in.
Yeah, she makes them with
soup.
a pumpkin puree, and then it's a slow cooked meat mix made with Penang.
What kind of fusion is that? You got your American Mexican with taquitos.
Call it New Americana. If I ever am president, I'm gonna mess with the chefs at the White House so much.
You got your indigenous America with pumpkin. You got, where does tomato soup come from? I don't know. France.
It comes from the 1950s.
I feel like it's French. And then you've got cheddar cheese, which is from the Cheddar Gorge, which we visited.
Yes, we visited Cheddar.
A fine place in England. It's Somerset.
All right. I love you, Simone. Have a good day.
Gorgeous. Take care. I love
Hope you enjoyed our conversation today.
I did, though. Will you get the kids when the time comes? Thank you. All right. Love you. Did you send Octavian to school wearing a lanyard today?
I might have.
Because apparently he identified on the schoolyard attempting to choke children with it upon not being given the toy that he wanted them to share.
That's the great thing about public school. You can't be kicked out.
Give it time, Malcolm. I'm receiving calls at this point. His teacher's like, he understands that he needs to ask to share things and to encourage people to share. But if they proceed to not share with him, he will use force. He punches, he kicks, and most recently he chokes with lanyards. So
that's delightful.
God bless
him. He fights for what he wants.
Yes.
That's why we recently showed him the original Mortal Kombats, so that he and his brother, because he and his brother wanted to fight, and I was like, oh my god,
what could possibly go wrong?
There's this movie you guys have to see. It defined my childhood.
Yeah, now he's going from punching and kicking to, I guess, like windmill punching and sideways leap kicking, like double.
That's the goal of sharing that stuff with them.
Air kicking.
I remember there was something else that I wanted to. Oh yeah, well, the Guardian's coming tomorrow, and I love that we still take the Guardian reporters at our house after the umpteenth hit piece. I wonder what this one's gonna be. I really hope it's a follow-up to the Hope Not Hate stuff, because that could be.
She reached out to us immediately after that hit piece came out and was like, I would like to shadow you as you campaign. And then I had a call with her and I was telling her how our goal was to try all these unconventional tactics and make it possible for, competent employed people who don't want to spend all their time raising money or all their time campaigning to actually get elected into office and make a positive difference. And she just seemed kind of jarred by it. Like, oh, I wasn't aware of that. Like she was, I felt like she had blinders on of just like, I'm going to look at this freakish enemy.
Well, I know, and I think because
SS
the Hope Not Hate
officer
piece
running
was
for
like, you're
office.
elitist, right? So she probably expected you to have an ultra elitist attitude towards all of this.
I guess.
And what I might tell her is, our attitudes are elitist insofar as we have disdain for the existing power structure and see it as beneath us, but we don't have disdain for the average American and see them as beneath us.
We have disdain for those who choose not to show up in whatever capacity that might be.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we may have a great deal of disdain for your average political candidate or political consultant or pollster, but we would have very little for the average American, which is what they were trying to frame that as. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. All right. You about ready to go?
Let me assume the position.
Oh, hold on. I'll also send you something that we can go over.
And let's see. Is your shirt okay? Is your hair okay? Is your mic on?
Oh, make sure for the reporter that you do wash my clothes tonight.
They're in the dryer. What flag is that, buddy?
It's the flag of 22. It's Teddy is gifted us flags again.
Oh.
Because he likes the flags.
Do you like the flag too?
Yeah.
Why do you like it?
Because Teddy really wants it, and I'll buy it for him as the proceeds.
Okay.